What makes Cristiano Ronaldo so great? Is it his skill, his talent, his ability? See, at Molliteum, we actually don't think it's any of that. Although that's great, we think there's one golden edge that he has over everybody else, and that's his mindset. More particularly, he has this ability to talk to himself and get himself locked in, even when all the fans around him, all the pressure around him is at its greatest. So in today's episode, what we're going to do here is break down how Cristiano Ronaldo talks to himself, the 3 different kinds of self-talk that he uses, and how you can start applying it immediately so you can get results like he does. Difference Makers, welcome back to the Difference Maker podcast. Your hosts, Matt and Chris Caldaroni, here with another exciting one today, diving into the self-talk secrets of Cristiano Ronaldo CR7. Any athlete anywhere on this planet, I'm disclosing this now, can use these things. There's a lot of good stuff we found when we dove into the research that we're going to be covering today, I should say, and something that I'm just excited to talk about because I feel like it can help a lot of athletes.
Well, self-talk is like anyone can do it, number one. Number two, it can be the downfall for some guys and girls because you get caught up in, just your own thoughts and things like that. And it can really work against you sometimes. So today should be really good. We're going to, Matt said, we're going to learn some stuff from the greats and hopefully you can apply it to your own game.
Right. So let's dive right into it. So the legendary Cristiano Ronaldo, if you haven't already, you're living under a rock, but you got to see the video. There's this famous video of him going around on Instagram, right? And it's of him about to take a penalty and he's talking to himself. It's evidently in Portuguese. There's so many people that translate it to English, but it's evidently in Portuguese. And it's good that they do translate it to English because none of us are, the majority of us don't speak Portuguese, I'm assuming. But looking at it and seeing Cristiano, you can see exactly what he's doing when it comes to his process. And it's very interesting, right? Because there's a couple myths we're going to shatter today about this self-talk being the be-all, end-all. Yeah. There is a pairing you need with it, and we're going to talk about that. However, when you look at it, you can see he's using it very strategic in the moment. And if you haven't already, you should go check it out. Just type in on like your Instagram or even computer, laptop, whatever, Cristiano Ronaldo self-talk. I'm telling you, you will see this clip and it's great. It's phenomenal. He's in the moment using it, right? Well, Big pressure moment.
Yeah, it's a great example of someone that we think, oh, this guy has everything. He's got it all down. He's right at the height of his game, everything. He's got all this experience and he still goes back to just basic things to use.
Yeah. And if you look at it, this is a tool for anybody listening to it here. This is a tool of toughness. Okay. So what does that mean? Let's start with that. A tool of toughness means that this is something you use to help you with the current situation. Mm-hmm. This is not something that will take care of the root cause of your insecurity. So a lot of times what we notice is myth number 1 to bust on it. But if you look at Cristiano Ronaldo, he's an athlete that's extremely confident in himself, mm-hmm. right? Trusts himself, just the way he talks. There's even another viral clip of him saying, I think he was on somebody's podcast. I think Rio Ferdinand was interviewing him, another soccer great. And he said, in my mind, I'm the best. In my mind, I'm the best. And he keeps repeating that. So he's already got a baseline of confidence to him. Right?
And it's not like just random, someone just saying oh, I'm the best. And then it's not followed up or anything. This is something that was built for over years.
Decades.
From when he was younger, all the stuff that led up from when he was younger, making it to that professional level. And then even going through some of the very difficult challenges of his career at an international level, at a club level. This isn't someone that just, I'm confident today.
No, exactly. And he worked at it. So when you look at it, and this is kind of the stage I'll set. So this was actually happening in the middle of a UEFA Champions League game. It was a quarterfinal match, Real Madrid and Juventus, when he was playing on Real Madrid at the time. Funny enough, he switches over to Juventus after. But anyways, it's the 97th minute. Real Madrid gets awarded a penalty. It determines them moving on the Champions League by aggregate. So for anybody that doesn't know what that is, that means that there's built up scores, right? So Juventus had so many from the previous game. Mm-hmm. Real Madrid had to hit it. If he hit this penalty, it was all good. Juventus players even went to the depths of stepping on the penalty spot and digging it out with their cleats.
Sure.
Right? So to try and throw him off.
Yep.
So what does he do? Centers himself, talks to himself, uses an approach we're going to talk about right now. and he was able to focus himself, scores the goal, they move on, and it's history from there, right? So let's break this down. Technique he used, it's called be your own coach. It's what we call it here at least. And it's really just telling yourself what to do. This is the most basic form of self-talk, and this is the first way to use it, which is to get yourself focused in performances.
Yeah.
Right? So there was a study that was actually published, a meta-analysis in the Perspectives of Psychological Science, and it found that if you use self-talk interventions of certain kinds, especially with this one where you're being your own coach, it's instructional self-talk, it significantly improves performance by directing attention to something that's task relevant, a cue. So what does this mean? Breaking it down to be simple. The reason Ronaldo uses this to complement his already strong confidence, if you will, is because in the middle of a game, you got to think of yourself for a sec. How hard is it to stay focused on the task at hand?
Oh, right. It can be especially with all the stuff going around, like distractions of other players, other teammates, coaches, anything.
Right.
You know, it's everyone always likes to be in their own head, but sometimes you have to say it out loud.
Of course.
You know,
yeah.
It's much easier to convince yourself when you're saying it out loud. Not that you're going to scream it from the mountaintops, but like, you know, just to give yourself a little bit of just calmness that I still have control over this.
And,
you know?
and what he was doing, because you got to remember where focus goes, energy flows. So what he was really doing in this setting was no matter what was going on around him, he was telling himself, he was demanding himself what to do. And why this works so well is because you take conscious control over your conscious focus. So a lot of times what we don't realize is that we are often driven by the subconscious or unconscious side of things.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Science has found 95% of our lives are subconsciously driven.
Well, not even,
right?
You don't even have to go into studies. If you all just close your eyes right now and try to shut off your brain for just 2 seconds.
You're always thinking.
You have to actively try to stop those thoughts.
Yes.
Right?
You have to. And if you don't, and not even stop, but like guide your attention. And if I were to Chris's point, if we were to ask you right now to close your eyes and just tell us what the first thing that comes to mind, I can almost guarantee it's something that's not coming from within. Maybe it's this podcast, right? But it's external. So a lot of times the problem is we're not in control of our conscious focus. So what Ronaldo was doing here, and what's a game changer for a lot of athletes, because we see this all the time, telling yourself what to do. And we say this all the time to players when they're sitting on a bench. Maybe if it's a hockey player, it's easier to go, shift by shift. If it's a soccer player, it's moment by moment. If it's a boxer, it's, punch by punch, regardless of what it is. You need to speak to yourself out loud. You got to coach yourself. There's an individual we work with in the NFL, and I was talking to him this past week in a session. I said, you got to be your own coach. Like the most important thing for you when you're on the line, you need to coach yourself. You need to tell yourself what to do next. And for him, this was the secret sauce because he had everything else. It was just that last minute focus of where to go. And, some people might think it sounds weird to do, but if you look at it and you look at Ronaldo and how he does this, he's coaching himself.
Yeah.
Right? He's genuinely sitting there saying, put it here, do this, do that, do this. But what that allows you to do is take control again over what you're doing. Well,
some of the guys that even I work with, not in the NFL, but a little bit younger, and they're going through that time of, I want to be able to get everything I need to get out of the rink that day at practice. And sometimes the environment that you're on, the team that you're on, it's not always the most inviting to go to.
Yeah.
And you have to not convince yourself, but going in, but set that purpose. And like you said, that self-coach of this is what I'm here to do today. This is what I'm here to get done. Let's go get it done, go home, come back tomorrow.
Yeah. And that's why this is such a great tool too, because the second part to the study on it is that it helps reduce distractions.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but have you ever, when you get into like not a yelling match, but like a talking over match with somebody?
Yeah.
And the person that's able to stick to their opinion often drives it home and just keeps saying it and saying
even
it.
If it's wrong.
Yeah. Even if it's wrong. So that is what being your own coach is. And we're not saying here by any means to, not listen to your coach, but the point being of how this really works. When you speak to yourself out loud, you got to think of it when you're being your own coach, almost as if you're winning that argument per se over the quote other person. And in this case, the other person being all the negative limiting thoughts that are out there.
Right. Yep.
Right. So it's taking conscious control over your focus on doing it. So what's amazing about this is one form of self-talk that you see the great Cristiano Ronaldo use.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into the second kind. Now, the second kind of self-talk that Cristiano Ronaldo uses, and there's another video out there of him doing this, is one for getting rid of negative self-talk. Okay. And An athlete who actually made this very, very famous, aside from Cristiano Ronaldo, is Serena Williams. Now, Serena Williams, like it says, kind of I see in front of me here, but widely regarded as an athlete. Listen to this. She used to write in a small notebook during her performances. So before she would go into matches, she would have a notebook where she wrote these down. Would say things like, "You'll move up, you will add spin, you are number one, you will win Wimbledon." And what these did was they put her into a state of being positive. Now, here's the funny part, and you see this with Ronaldo, because this was the famous clip where if you look at the one where he's playing for Portugal, he's standing there and he goes, "You will do this. You will accomplish this. This is regular for you. You've got it." So what he's doing is he's overriding the negative self-talk.
Yeah.
Right. And just like we said in the last one where it's controlling your focus, the next step now is what you're telling it to do. So what he was using in that form of self-talk there for him was to really get over we'll call it like just the negative high performance environment he was in.
Yeah. Is there anything in that study that says why? Like, because from what I'm thinking, when you're thinking in your own head, when you're trying to just stop it, you're not actually doing a physical action. Like Serena Williams, for example, she's doing a physical action of writing it down.
Right.
When you're saying it, you're doing a physical action of saying it. You're not just thinking it. Is there like a...
So get this. So there's another study that was done, published in the Clinical Psychological Science, and it found that distanced self-talk, because this technique, what we say is to talk to yourself like you're talking to a friend, right? And it's known as distanced self-talk. So it helps you manage negative emotions, because what it actually does at the scientific root of it, it removes you from a first person point of view. So first person point of view is I am, right? So if you notice, if you've scrolled through anything Instagram mindset, everybody talks about I am statements, right? I am, the moment you say I am, it becomes a belief of who you are. What distance self-talk does, when you talk to yourself like you're talking to a friend, it distances you from who you are. And it's as if you're coaching yourself now.
So it's easier to take that approach from...
So, well, what it does is, and the studies found this in the research, it lowers emotional reactivity.
Okay.
So when you talk, so think of this, right? How easy is it to beat yourself up?
Oh, completely.
So easy, right? And when you're beating yourself up, you're saying stuff to yourself like, "I'm an idiot. What was I doing there? Why did I do that?" And you have this emotional reactivity to things. So when you have to switch that in your mind of you're talking to yourself like you're talking to somebody else, it puts almost like, if you can picture it, a filter on your emotions. So it spaces you out, right, from yourself. It pushes you away from the emotional reactivity to things, and it lowers it compared to, and it found this in the study, compared to those who use first person language. Okay. So they put two groups together, right? And they said, okay, one group, talk to yourself with the you statements. You're good. You're great. You can be better on this. That was great because it removes the emotional part from it.
Right.
And if you think of self-talk and the negative parts, and negative self-talk that happens, the negativity really comes from you beating up on yourself.
Right.
Right. So it's not coming from necessarily like, just everyday thought. It's coming from you finding and picking things out yourself. And there's another study done, or a second part of it. The reason this happens is because you start nitpicking yourself and only looking for the negative. So the emotion, if you think of it, we are a reflection of our emotions, right? How you feel in a current moment, you act. That's the only version you'll ever get of people. If you're in a negative state of mind and you've got that frame on, what you say to yourself in that moment is going to be an inherently negative thing.
Yeah. That totally makes sense, simply because like even one of the athletes that I mentioned as an example of walking into an environment that he doesn't necessarily like, that environment then causes him to think of maybe I'm not good enough for this, this, and this. Then the negative self-talk happens, and there it is.
Well, there's a really good story too about to speak about environment quick. I don't think enough athletes gives the environment enough credit for how much it actually influences them.
For sure. It's one of the hardest things to pick up because it's always, you have to solve this.
Yes. Right? And it's funny because there was an MLB player, he was hitting poorly. And it was this wild, like out of nowhere thing that started happening. So, and his mental coach was getting interviewed, and he goes, so what was funny was that we noticed oftentimes whenever a player starts performing negative, we start to look within them and say like, what are you doing wrong? What's going on? When really it was coming from him going to give talks at his old high school. And his old high school, funny enough, he started doing this like give back thing. When he would go into those environments, because I guess he was bullied in high school to a degree,
They bring him back.
he came back to it.
Mm.
So the interesting thing was, as he was leaving that environment, he was maybe going in positive, but coming out negative, right? So self-talk, you have to understand, it's a form of coping, right? How you talk to yourself, it's a form of reasoning and it's a form of coping. So if I walk into a situation and I see a house on fire, right? And I'm going to go in there and save it. I'm going to be telling myself the whole time, okay, go here, don't go there, do this, don't do that. It's processing info. Part of that processing, though, is where you're taking in that info and making something of it. So if you're going into a negative environment and it's somewhere that used to be negative in your past, to your point about this player walking into his environment, it's interesting because it doesn't just happen with sport, it happens anywhere in life. And you've got to regulate that or it can get you.
And you know what? Even the regulation part, because even there's a point I think there is too much of self-talk in this sense, and maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, we're gonna no. We're gonna talk about overdoing it.
I was gonna say my experience with that is, you think about it too much, and then it doesn't come off properly. Whatever you're trying to do.
Yep.
But yeah.
But that's the funny part. Like that's overthinking. That's not self-talk.
That's exactly
right. So self-talk, a key component. It's a great idea you brought up, or a great point. Sorry, it's self-talk, right? The talking part gets it out of your head and into the world. And I know that sounds a little woo-woo, but truthfully, if you think about it, why is it that one of the best remedies for overthinking is journaling everything out? And don't even use the word journaling. Just write what's going on in your mind down.
Yeah.
It empties it, right? Talking is the same form. Why is it that talk therapy or talking to a friend even, or talking to a parent, whatever, why does it get so much? People say it gets off my chest. It doesn't. Nothing sits on your chest. What it really is that it's in your head.
Yeah.
And when you start talking or writing, if you can't talk to somebody, it gets it out of your head.
You're able to put it down on something.
Right.
Take action.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when it comes to it, it's self-talk. It's not overthinking.
Yeah.
And I think that's a major distinction a lot of people don't realize is if you're going to do this, like Cristiano, like Serena, Serena wrote it down, right? And read it back to herself. Cristiano says it out loud. You have to have that form of out of your head into the world.
Right.
So it's a major part of it, right? Yep. One thing I wanted to say quickly on this too, because I think it's an important part of let's call it overdoing it, like when to really know you're overdoing it. Listen, I think you need to become, you need to become a master of yourself, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean that you need to know yourself arguably better than anybody does, because you've got to be able to know what your limits are with this. So if I were to sit here all day long and I were to just be talking to myself and talking to myself and talking to myself, I would go crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think it's people have seen that.
Right. However, if I were to just sit here and I know select situations going into certain conversations or certain scenarios or whatever, I know exactly when I need to talk to myself.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I know, for example, when I'm about to do a talk, even if it's with the same group that we work with year after year, there's not nerves, but there's that exciting feeling. I know I've got to talk to myself still before it. Even the 15 minutes before, where it's like, okay, hey, you've got this. Stick to your points. Put your energy on the audience. Go nuts.
Yeah.
Right. That's perfect. I don't need to be the guy that's sitting there and everything that comes up in the day, it's like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. At the start, I was, right? Until I was able to hone in on my own mind and control it. But you have to realize if you're going to do this, you got to find what works for you. The moment it becomes something where it's almost like you're talking to, an imaginary friend all the time, maybe you got to reel it in a bit.
Yeah.
But you got to know yourself.
Well, I would even say, for a very human level that everyone has gone through, is just rereading those notes over and over and over and over again before a test. And then you overthink it, and then all of a sudden you forget about it on the test, and then you start to freak out when it's like you have everything. It's just more so, like you said, before your talk. It's not like you don't know what you're saying.
Right.
It's just, okay, right. I have what I have. Let's go get it done.
It's a refresher, right? It's using Ronaldo's first approach, right? That's what I was using it for, which was, I would say it's a mix of the last one we're going to talk about in a sec, but it was more so directing me of where I want to go specifically in that moment.
Exactly.
Right. It was a focal cue.
Instead of what do I have to talk about, this, that, and everything. It's just, I know what I have to do. let's go do it.
Yeah.
Done it 1,000 times, let's go do it.
Absolutely. And that's why I was trying to pull up a study for it, but I couldn't find it here. But anyways, last part we'll say on this. So when it comes to overcoming negative self-talk with this one, you want to talk to yourself as though you're talking to a friend. That means that you need to replace the I with you, right? So you got to stop that. Even stay away from that. Take it away from negative connotations. Don't say that part. Like frame it to be positive. You're good. Keep going. That's a great one to go with. Something in the form of when it comes to getting rid of negative self-talk. So I was talking to an athlete before this, and we were talking about a coach that he has who's unfortunately just overarchingly negative on things. And I say this in the utmost respect. A lot of coaches are under a lot of pressure. I don't think players really understand how much pressure sometimes.
Sure.
And it's again, speaking of environment, they're stressed out a lot.
Oh,
right?
You don't know until you get there, right?
You don't know until
everyone
you get
has
there.
a coach.
So I was saying to this guy, I was like, dude, you just got to be telling yourself today, like, remind yourself of this. You're going to be fine. They're just stressed out.
Yeah.
And that go-to for him is like, that's his safe haven.
Yeah.
Right? Even for me, when coming into certain things, it's like, you got to just remind yourself of the animal we're dealing with. We have a cousin that we talked to who taught me this. And he goes, Matt, he taught me in a much different context, but he goes, Matt, you got to understand, always know the animal you're dealing with. And it's like, oh my God, that it resonated so much with me because now even when I'm going through it, it's like, okay, who's the animal I'm dealing with here?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Like, what is really happening? And then the self-talk kind of triggers itself on that.
Yeah.
Self-talk
is, if you use it properly, it's pretty cool.
Yes.
It works really well.
Now, really quickly, if you're an athlete who's looking to better their self-talk and you're trying to push through that negative barrier within yourself or maybe that negative voice in your head, consider us for some coaching at Molliteum. See, we help athletes from the youth to professional level to tap into their extra gear and build their resilience. And we do so through one of the forms of self-talk. If you're somebody who's looking to get to the next level, get rid of that and really take control, then consider applying down below. We have an application, one for under 18s and parents. Click that link if you're one of those, or one for someone who's over 18, able to pay for their own training, and you want to have an application with us. We only take on 2 athletes per week or 8 total per month while spots last. So click the link down below, pick what's best for you, and let's get on an application call. So with that, let's go into the final form of self-talk, and then we will wrap up with the one thing that Ronaldo and all these great athletes do to complement this. And the last kind of self-talk is one that you're going to use during pressure-filled situations. And this is a very obvious one. However, it is one that I feel like a lot of athletes neglect and assume, right?
Neglect and assume,
meaning that I don't think we realize how much self-talk can help us get through pressure-filled situations.
Yeah.
But you got to remember about self-talk, like I said, it's a toughness tool. A toughness tool means it's a tool to just help you get through the challenging times.
And I would say even not only we don't think that it can help out that much, but in those pressure situations, in order to call yourself out and just kind of stop that chaos that's going around, that's like that. It's a toughness thing. You have to be in control. You have to be willing to call yourself out during the chaos.
Well, you got to, it's like
right?
pulling, have you ever seen that picture and it's a bunch of matches that are lined up and the first like 5 of them are burned and then there's one that's pulled away and the rest aren't, right?
Yeah,
it's like the power of stepping away.
Yeah.
That's also the same thing with the power of like stepping back from your thoughts and really controlling it by talking to yourself.
For sure.
So the last form that Ronaldo uses, and he's been seen to use it on footage and film, is what we call here being your calming voice, or this is to be used during pressure-filled situations where you basically deflate the pressure, you step back, and you really put things in perspective. Someone else who made this famous was Michael Phelps. During the 2008 Beijing Olympics, his goggles ended up filling up with water in the 200-meter butterfly final, and instead of panicking, he talked himself through it.
What an animal.
Right? Crazy. And he won gold. So it's like, okay, so what really was at the basis of this being your calming voice? Well, first off, being your calming voice is what it sounds like. Just calm yourself down. It's having that. So the first 2, the focus one and the negative one, were more so about directive communication, right? So you're telling yourself, right? You need to do this. You're this. You're this. The calming self-talk one, or being your calming voice, this is more so about your tone. Okay. So when they interviewed Michael Phelps about how did you do this, whatever, he goes, I kept calm, spoke to myself, and just did what I had to do. And it's like, okay, so that speaks on everything. And if you look at Ronaldo in his video, you can see he's using a form of this, because one thing about self-talk you got to understand, you got to mix these things, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to be talking to yourself like a coach, and to deflate pressure and to make things more positive. So he's using a tone, though, when he's talking to himself, that's, okay, do this. Okay, do this. And he's consciously taking that breath.
Yeah.
Right?
I'd highly, if you guys have a chance right now, just look up that video, because it is pretty cool to see it in action. It's easier to see it.
Yeah, to understand it. So anyway, so why this calming kind of voice works is because, and this was again published in the Perspectives on Psychological Science, going back to that study, found that self-talk interventions significantly improved athletic performance, particularly when athletes used a positive and instructional talk to manage stress and maintain focus. So what does that mean? Positive and instructional. That's your key, right? A tone that matches positive and instructional. So here's what I mean by this. If I'm talking to myself like, you're going to do this, you're going to get it done. Okay. Probably not super calm, right? If I'm talking to myself like, hey, you've got this, keep pushing forwards, you're going to be fine. So even with Michael, it comes back, they were talking about what he said. He was saying things to himself like, stay steady, keep focused, stroke by stroke.
Yeah.
So that, and he was saying it from what he says in the interview after, okay, and he said, and this is where we'll pan off in a sec about the things he did before, but he goes, paired with my mental training, my self-talk was what kept me focused on what I had to do. So he was telling himself, stay steady. Like, you got to think of that. If you're in a situation, everything's burning around you. You ever see that picture of the dogs playing poker?
Yeah.
And the room's burning around
Everything's
them?
okay.
Right. But like, that's exactly what it is, right? Like, I don't think athletes realize sometimes how much we'll say like fires they're dealing with on a consistent basis in their own life. And I think we like to all put on a brave face sometimes and pretend it's not there, when really that's one of the worst things you can do, because all it's ever going to do is build up.
Yeah. Well, that tone that you're talking about, the way that I think about it is, if I have, a captain that I'm looking to, how would they say it?
Yeah.
What would that person, what would the tone be? What would the calmness be? But not also the calmness, but what would the intensity be? And it just shows like you have that confidence in that individual, right? You have that, let's go. Like, I'm ready, and if you can match that tone with the person of, who you would want to follow, I think that would be a decent starting point for you.
Well, it's actually, that's a very real example. There's an NBA player we work with, and he's in a leadership role now. One of the things he's focused on so much and is used to his advantage is this self-talk during pressure situations in a calming tone.
Yeah.
Because the biggest thing with him is he goes, I'm a leader now. Like, I can't, before I truthfully, like any athlete, I could be a little bit more rambunctious on the court. Like, I could show that emotion a bit more. Now I got to keep myself steady. And it's like, you got to talk to yourself, right? You have to really consciously control and talk to yourself about how things are going.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, it's never going to come out well. So this is kind of like combining the first two approaches, right? You're going to tell yourself what you've got to do. So that combines the first one in the focal part. But the second kind it's going to use is in that distanced self-talk. So using that third person tone of you.
Right.
But where this all comes together is the tonality you use. You've got to make sure when you're talking to yourself, and I would highly suggest for any athlete who's really going to put this into play, do what Serena did and write out those phrases and just stick to 3, right? Like, for me, it's always going to be, you've got this, keep going, and push harder.
Yep.
Those are always going to be my 3. Like, that's my constant come to. It's like, you've got this, stick with it, or push harder, right? Regardless of what it is. So, but write down those 3. But the thing is, for all of these, you need to, I would suggest, because I've never seen an athlete who's not really in a high performing pressure situation, keep the calming tone for all of it.
Yeah. Calming tone
like
is
that.
always the best.
That should be your default.
Yeah.
Right. It should be the tone that you're constantly turning to, you're constantly looking to, and you're constantly using, because it's what allows you to stay focused on what has to get done.
Well, yeah, because one of the hardest things when you're in that pressure situation is to understand that, or remember that you still do have the skill. You have all the abilities to do everything.
Yep.
It's just a matter of, it's okay. Like, let's take 2 seconds. Like, we're still good. It's not like we're going to, all of a sudden we can't keep up with anyone anymore. We're still good. It's just a matter of, let's go do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's It's really helping you, like Chris was saying before, get out of your own head and stop the overthinking, let's call it, and really put things into action, into practice. Otherwise, what's going to end up happening is you're going to constantly have this just frequent inner dialogue that, it's funny. I think one of the things that's very easy to utilize with self-talk, if you were to just really understand that if some of the things you said in your head, you were to say out loud and what you would think people would react to when you say it, you would talk to yourself much nicer.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And I'm not saying, talk beautifully to yourself all the time. We're humans. We're going to screw a lot of things up and we're going to be very hard on ourselves. However, what I'm saying is, if you want to be a top performer, you've got to think like some of these individuals. Cristiano Ronaldo. I'm the best in my mind. I'm the best in my mind. I'm the best in my mind. Mike Tyson. What did Mike Tyson do? Mike Tyson used to pay somebody to tell him he was the greatest of all time. Mm-hmm. Right? So I guess Mike couldn't get out of his own head, and for evident reasons, but he was able to control himself. My point being, self-talk controls it all. So the one underlying thing that you have to understand, if you're going to use these three forms, and then we'll recap it. All of these athletes have a base level of mental training. And I think that's very important to understand. So what does that mean? That means that they all had a foundational level of confidence that kept them in it. So what does that mean? That means that before they got to a point of having to talk to themselves on the field, court, or in the water, they trusted their skills. Okay? So what Chris and I are saying right now is that if you just tell yourself, you're good, you're good, you're good, you're good, and you prepared horribly, you have zero confidence behind what you're doing, and you're hoping that these phrases are going to set you apart, you're kidding yourself.
Yeah.
Will it get you out of a mode of, survival to potentially thriving? No. Will it get you to a point, though, of outrunning that challenging situation for the time being? For the time being, yes, but it's not going to take care of the issue.
And guaranteed you have someone like that on your team right now, so you can use them as that example of what not to do.
So, and we're not going to dive into confidence right now. It's just a last minute part we wanted to add into this because we don't want to lead anybody down the wrong path here and tell you self-talk is going to be the thing that gets you to the next level. Just the same way that people think you can shout affirmations in the mirror and then all of a sudden your confidence is through the roof. It doesn't work like that. It takes legitimate, real, precise work to go into any sense of competition, excited, certain, and focused on what you need to do. Right? The self-talk is the last piece to it. It's going to maybe touch on the focal part, but it's really going to help you with the toughness piece.
Yep.
You need to make sure going into performances, though, you are absolutely sure of yourself. And that only comes through repetition, repetition, repetition. I'm not going to repeat it now because we've done so many episodes on it. I think we did just the other week on a confidence episode.
Yep.
You need that. I'm telling you right now, if you haven't already, check that episode out because it's important. But you have to understand, I want you to think of this like the cherry on top. Think of all these athletes I mentioned today, Chris and I mentioned, Ronaldo, Serena Williams, Michael Phelps. If you think of any of these athletes, the last thing they are is lacking confidence.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You got to think of that for a sec. These are individuals who are constantly in a state of confidence because they're working on it. So understand this. And to recap it, it's very simple stuff. Number one, first form of self-talk you can use is one to help you stay focused. This is where you're going to start telling yourself what to do. So like Ronaldo, put the ball here, strike it like this, simple stuff, cues. Second type of self-talk that Ronaldo used was to get rid of the negative self-talk. And that's when you're talking to yourself like a friend. This is what Serena Williams did a lot. And she wrote things down, you. Remove the I, start writing to yourself, talk to yourself. That's the most important part. And the last one being having that calming voice or using self-talk during pressure situations. This is where you want to use a calming tone. Do that for all kinds of self-talk, no matter what. I'm telling you right now, that is the most important part. Combine them all together. They will work for you. Like I suggested, take 3 phrases, right? The ones that matter most to you. Write the 3 of them out and make this your repetitive kind of, every single day. The last part to it, you need a base of confidence. This will not take care of confidence issues. This will not be the thing that pushes you, let's call it over the edge if you're lacking confidence right now. You need to build that before you use this. This is the cherry on top of the cake. You need to first build a foundation.
Yeah.
Right.
And hey, if you need that foundation to build that confidence, link below.
Right? So yes, really quick to kind of tie that in. If you got value from this, please like, subscribe, click the notification bell, leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps us a lot. Comment on our YouTube video if you're tuning in from YouTube. Tell us what kind of self-talk you need to use. And of course, if you want to apply for our one-on-one coaching while spots last, links are down below. One's for the U18s and parents, the other's for over 18 if you're paying for your own training. With that being said, use this self-talk, put it into action, and we'll see you in the next one. Now, if you like this episode and want more of these deep dives like we go into on our podcast, check it out here. And if you want some more short form, to the point, direct trainings that are about 10 to 15 minutes long, check it out here where we have playlists full of different topics on how you can build your resilience.